Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Our first speaker today is going to be Neeharika Naik-Dhungel, who is going to be speaking on PMC Project Emerging CPO Opportunities in Climate Mitigation. Neeharika is part of the President's Management Council Interagency Rotation Program, and she was brought on as a policy analyst for climate mitigation. And we're very excited that she spent the last 6 months with NOAA. And so today she's going to be presenting on what she was doing in those 6 months. So Neeharika, turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm going to switch off my camera right now so we can focus on the presentation. As Katie said, Brenda, my colleague, the second speaker on this webinar, Brenda Rashleigh, and I are participants of the Office of Personnel Management's Presidential Management Council Rotation Program. For those who may not be aware of the program, this is a program that allows mid to senior level federal staff professional growth opportunities by working at another agency for 6 months. And my rotation assignment has been at the Climate Program Office, or I will be referring to the office as CPO throughout this presentation. And it ends at the end of September, that is this Friday. And during my assignment, as Katie mentioned, I focused on climate mitigation, which is an emerging opportunity that CPO is looking at. And I will talk a little bit more about what I mean by emerging. So I will be covering 3 main topics through this over this presentation. One is to just give a little bit of a better understanding about CPO. I do recognize that there are many folks on the call who are NOAA staff, but I confess that until I joined CPO, I did not have a deep appreciation for just the breadth of the work that they do, the strategic backdrop to the assignment, and then give a deep dive on climate mitigation for the audience to develop a better understanding on the potential focus of CPO's efforts. So the rotation objectives, as the way that the rotation assignment is set up, that there's a signed MOU agreement that captures the rotation objectives, the deliverables, and the professional development goals to be accomplished in the process. And in my case, we identified analyzing climate mitigation opportunities as part of CPO's strategies initiative, highlight the opportunities. There's also a component about supporting CPO staff meeting and interactions, as well as help support the rollout of the strategic plan. And then the third component of it is focusing on overall executive core qualification developmental goals. And in my case, it was focused on leading change, people, and building coalitions. There was also a deliverable that was identified, and for me, it was developing a report that culminated all the findings of my overall efforts, as well as the overall kind of status of climate mitigation efforts that are already perhaps happening within the within CPO especially, but perhaps within NOAA as well. I'd like to start off with just kind of bringing up this org chart, which gives you a better idea, and I think it's an org chart that especially NOAA staff members would be very familiar with. And I'd like focus to kind of go beyond the Office of the Undersecretary for Oceans and Atmosphere, but kind of go down to the line offices. One of the line offices that is identified here is the Ocean and Atmospheric Research Line Office. And the Climate Program Office is located within this Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. I also would like you to kind of draw your attention to some of the other line offices that are mentioned here, because when I talk about the focus of my work, some of these were also offices that I interacted with. Within the Climate Program Office, as I pointed out, falls within the Office of Atmospheric Research, and this slide gives you a better idea about the other different components to NOAA's overall research network. As you can see to the top, on the left, the middle left, actually to the extreme left, but in the middle is where you'll see NOAA's Climate Program Office identified. But the NOAA Climate Program Office also works closely with the NOAA research labs. All of these, the Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing Program, Sea Grant college programs, as well as the ocean acidification programs. And there are these other programs too where there is ongoing work, but I've highlighted the programs I ended up working a little more closely with during my rotation due to the focus of my assignment. So I talked about CPO, and I mentioned that when I joined NOAA and when I came here for this assignment, I was not very familiar with the Climate Program Office's work. And because of that, I wanted to kind of highlight take the abstract and make it a little more concrete by pointing out these 3 examples that are listed here. The first one is a clip that you will find on NBC Today's website from last week. NBC Today's show on September 15th actually talked at length about a NOAA pilot project to investigate surface ozone and PM 2.5 in underserved neighborhoods in New York City, where pollution directly impacts human health, especially during heatwave events. NOAA's Climate Program Office's Atmospheric Chemistry, Carbon Cycle and Climate Office, a program known more commonly by its acronym of AC4, and Earth Radiation Budget, provided major funding for these and other affiliated studies for 2 consecutive summers, 2022 and 2023. The piece that's there on NBC's Today's show actually talked more about this year's deployment that started just after July 4th and was coordinated with flights of the NOAA's Atmospheric Emissions and Reactions Observed from Megacities to Marine Areas campaign known as AROMA, and the NOAA's Coastal Urban Plume Dynamic Studies of Cupid's campaign, Twin Otter Flights. The second article that I highlight here is New York Times had a Climate Forward live stream event last week where they covered the heat.gov website. And the heat.gov website is the web portal for the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, or known more commonly as NIHIS. This screenshot here gives you a better idea about just some recent work that came out of that overall effort done by heat.gov. And what it shows that in collaboration with the National Centers for Environmental Information, the CE's Division of Climate.gov team, which is the program within CPO that does a lot of work on education and raising awareness. They produced a collection of image highlights for the annual State of the Climate report that is edited by NCEI scientists and published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. The images will be used by NOAA and AMS to promote the 2022 report online and in social media in coming days. So as you can see, the Climate Program Office's research efforts have a very tangible effect in terms of better understanding for the audience, for different stakeholders, whether they are academicians, whether they are communities, on better understanding research efforts and data collection efforts underway on climate. Now, the next few slides will kind of give you a better understanding of the strategic backdrop against which the work, my overall rotation assignment was done. This is a CPO did a program office review in 2022 to lay out its overall strategic plan for the next 4 or 5 years. And this is a draft plan that is available on, on CPO's website. But as you can see here, what CPO, through its overall strategic planning effort, identified 3 key areas where they see their strengths, their core vision, and their core activities playing out. One is advancing the science foundation for climate change adaptation, resilience, and mitigation. Second is around improving trusted, actionable information for these 3 topic areas. Third is enhancing literacy and capacity to respond to climate change. And all of these are areas that end up affecting people, economies, environments that need to thrive in a changing climate. This also has an underlying underpinned by diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility. And I would say I was so impressed by some of the ongoing activities that kind of very immediately invoke DEI and environmental justice components. And these overall activities are also overlaid with the CPO's climate risk areas initiatives. The climate risk areas initiatives are overall, I look at 5 initial areas, and where there's a common purpose seen around societal challenges and risks. Climate mitigation is one of them, but there's also extreme heat, droughts, floods, water availability and quality, coastal changes and inundation, and changes in marine and freshwater ecosystems. These are not seen as discrete activities, as we all know from wherever we are located, that there is definitely a correlation amongst these different areas. And health and equity is a component that plays out very clearly amongst all of them. I'm going to now start focusing more on the mitigation challenge, which is what I looked at. The mitigation challenge, as it was framed out by CPO's strategic planning efforts, was that it's based on the fact that there's a widespread recognition of the impact of greenhouse gas emissions on the climate system, which is leading to dangerous accelerated warming. The mitigation challenge is also present because there's a growing demand for information about current and future greenhouse gas emissions and concentrations and the impact on the state of the global climate system. And there's a demand for understanding what are the options and effectiveness of climate change mitigation measures at different scales across a spectrum of disciplines. In their overall effort, CPOs has identified a vision under which the climate mitigation focus will play out. And this vision is that the nation has a fully leveraged interdisciplinary science, technology, and socioeconomic engagement to mitigate future climate change. What is intrinsically also captured in this vision is the need to enhance existing collaborations and identify new collaborations such that there's a fully leveraged interdisciplinary science, technology, and socioeconomic engagement happening to really optimize mitigation efforts. Some of the initial opportunities that were identified that fall within CPO's purview are growing CPO's sphere of influence and resources to comprehensively cut across interdisciplinary and interconnected areas. In the beginning, I talked about climate mitigation being an emerging opportunity. And this is a good time to kind of get a little bit more into the fact that there's already a lot of really excellent work taking place around adaptation and resilience. And in some ways, work on mitigation could be one that could actually perhaps be integrated further into the work that is already underway, and thereby grow CPO's sphere of influence. There's also an opportunity of informing mitigation choices through greenhouse gas and climate system observations, monitoring and modeling, for which there's already a bedrock of work happening within CPO. And the other two opportunities are interdisciplinary research to assess the implications of mitigation options, including renewable energy, coastal and oceanic carbon removal, what are the socio-economic innovation and low carbon adaptation approaches that could be used for mitigation. And then further than taking all this data and research efforts to further engage, educate, and build a better understanding about the role of climate mitigation amongst communities and amongst the kind of principal investigators who do work in this area. So CPI identified 9 potential directions that could be used to provide that opportunity. And all of them, and all 9 are listed here. And over the next few slides, I'll kind of go a little bit further into the kind of 5 main areas that I identified in better understanding this area. So the first area is greenhouse gas data, observations, and modeling. And those are captured in the first 4 of those potential directions that are captured on the overall potential direction slide, kind of areas identified by CPO. The greenhouse gas data observations and modeling would look to better look further at observations and understanding of atmospheric chemistry, carbon cycle, and Earth system interactions. And as I mentioned earlier, CPO has been doing work in greenhouse gas data for several decades until now. The desire would be now to take that and take it up a notch to better understand climate mitigation. So the work that happens in monitoring, in observations, in campaigns, in better understanding the effect on human activities, in better understanding current climate trajectories. If there was a climate mitigation component that was looked at using that current basis, or to see whether new work needs to be done, that would be one area that CPO could potentially work on. The other area that potential direction that was identified was around carbon dioxide removal. And for those members of the audience who are not intimately familiar, who are not thinking front and center of NOAA's work, the work is primarily in ocean and atmosphere. And so carbon dioxide removal methodologies in particular are drawing a lot of interest, especially as they pertain to the coasts. What are the effectiveness? What are the risks and impacts? There are a lot of carbon dioxide removal technologies that are being looked at, some that have had ongoing work, and many that are emerging areas. So this is again another area that looked like a good area for potential direction for CPA to direct their overall, direct some of their activities. The third area is renewable energy. And when I talk about renewable energy here, I primarily mean, again, those that pertain to atmosphere and oceans. And so it would be primarily offshore wind, tidal and wave energy, and then also some emerging areas in which there has been more research monies available in the last few years and potentially could be areas of interest to CPO and NOAA. The fourth one is social science research that primarily looks at greenhouse gases, looks at CDR, looks at renewable energy, and what are the kind of social science impacts that and research that can be done in this area. And again, an area I've been left very impressed in terms of the different principal investigators that CPO works with to better develop understanding on social science, on the social science elements to the climate, to the different climate areas that NOAA works on. And last but not least is education and awareness. So What would that mean? Would that mean co-developing climate mitigation products with different decision makers? Would it mean educating and raising awareness about climate mitigation? So again, all different directions that CP has already identified as areas that they potentially may want to look at. Now, to do this overall effort, I developed a stakeholder feedback approach, and by which I mean I kind of went out and spoke to a diverse group of stakeholders. I would say, though, I spoke to over 50 people, 50 individuals and groups and offices, I still feel like I just scratched the surface. I used what the lean approach, I think if folks are familiar with it, it's an approach by which how one can more effectively look at overall objectives, what are outcomes being considered, test out some of these outcomes with the impacted stakeholders, and kind of use that to inform the overall objectives. Does it mean that the objectives will need to be redefined or perhaps modified in some way? And what I did is I identified uniform discussion topics, by which I mean I had consistent topics that I identified that were then discussed across this broad swath of discussons, and so that the information I got back was pretty uniform. And this effort pretty much took place from around May through this month. And who I ended up contacting were, as I pointed out, a whole bunch of the folks identified in blue. That means a lot of the different NOAA research groups. In terms of external stakeholders, I spoke to DOE as well as EPA. I reached out to different states. And I did speak to ASCE, though in a very limited capacity. Our conversations on climate mitigations, we kind of broached the idea. There was interest, but unfortunately didn't have time to pursue it further. I bring up this slide to also show that there are a bunch of other stakeholders for whom climate mitigation is of interest. In some cases, some of these are groups that are actively engaged in better evaluating greenhouse gases or better understanding how to get to net zero goals. In some cases, they are funding a lot of research in some new and emerging areas, such as some foundations and some nonprofit organizations. Again, even in terms of state and regional organizations, there's even an under 2 coalition that's been established, who are regions and states who have signed up for net zero goals and are collectively working together, collaborating and finding points of synergies that they could be working together. The next few slides kind of will go over some of the key kind of highlights of what I found out. With regard to greenhouse gas data observational modeling, soon after I joined CPO to work on this assignment, in June of 2023, NOAA hosted this greenhouse gas workshop, which was the first time it brought together staff across NOAA labs, NASA, and another office called Nestis to better understand, first of all the different areas that they are all doing work around greenhouse gases. And the overall intent was to, and which I thought came across really well, I attended the workshop and I thought it was extremely well done, was improve awareness and coordination of all the different greenhouse gas activities through exchanging information and networking across NOAA. It also was done to increase visibility of NOAA's GHG efforts and better understand the kind of data, the kind of models, the kind of products that are there that right now pretty much reside on the websites of the different labs. So I urge folks to just go back and take a look at the different labs and take a look at their websites. It's just fascinating data that's being collected, and this is data that is built on rigorous kind of scientific parameters, and it's really amazing to see the kind of data that has been collected for a while. And then also kind of get into addressing one of the kind of overall outcomes of a plan in place about developing GHG observation modeling capabilities with NOAA's domestic and international partners to reliably track changes in natural and human-made GHG emissions. In terms of carbon dioxide removal technologies, these, as I mentioned earlier, they are a portfolio of techniques that are there, that are being considered or already in use to remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and lock them away permanently in reservoirs. CDR is now considered a very essential component of successful strategies for limiting warming, and meeting the targets that were established by IPCC will require increasing reliance on CDR technologies, in addition to looking at a host of other different options. Just to give you an idea about what we mean by CDR, there are macros, some of them are like macroalgal cultivation, ocean alkalinity enhancement, coastal blue carbon, direct air capture, direct ocean removal, and ocean fertilization. And coming back to NOAA's overall assets, it has assets in terms of observations, in terms of models, in terms of assessments, in terms of spatial planning tools and stakeholder inputs that could all be used to inform decision making. And what NOAA did in May was to put out this just really worth reading white paper on carbon dioxide removal technologies. This was a culmination of NOAA Science Council's efforts that started in November of 2020, and it brought together an interdisciplinary team to develop this white paper. This slide here gives you a better understanding of some of the development, and this is one table from that white paper, and what it does is it just gives you a better understanding of overall NOAA assets in observations, in modeling, in terms of looking at environmental impacts, in terms of data and decision-making tools that are there. It identifies the kind of development that is necessary for CDR to really come into full use. And then it also identifies what could be the impact by doing this research. And I thought this was just a really well done paper, and this table in particular gives a very thorough understanding of what is the current status of NOAA's overall efforts. In terms of renewable energy, a lot of the work that's happening is around offshore wind energy. And when I mean by offshore wind energy, just want to take this slide to better help explain the data needs around offshore wind energy. There are primarily like 4 areas in which there is more data needs, and they're identified based on the different time spans. One is what's called seconds to hours. The second is hours to days. The third is days to months. And the last is seasonal to decadal. And by looking closely at each of these areas, there are different levels of understanding that one gains of offshore wind energy. Some of the work that is already happening is happening around the seconds to hours. And that in itself is yielding some amazing data that is being used by the offshore, or just by wind energy developers, as well as by other federal agencies working in this area. The 2 other areas that I'd identified previously, wave and tidal renewable energy sources, DOE has taken quite a bit of a lead on it and has been coordinating with NOAA. And this is very much a fledgling industry in the US. France has been doing a lot of work in the English Channel, and there is some experimentation that's going on off of near Oahu, and there's a test phase in Oregon. In terms of emerging areas that could also fall into this, into NOAA's purview, would be an area called space-based solar power, which is an energy form that has been reviewed literally every decade by European and American researchers and has received some DOE funding, in which solar panel equipped energy transmitting satellites collect high intensity uninterrupted solar radiation by using giant mirrors to reflect huge amounts of solar rays. And this radiation is then wirelessly beamed to Earth in a safe and controlled way. There's pretty much, there is no commercialization that's happened, very much a research effort, and there is some efforts to kind of pre-commercialization work that's happening in Europe, in Japan, and there's a project at Caltech. And the other area is mining the deep sea for critical minerals, which is again an area where there's like a very focused kind of effort, and again is an emerging area. In terms of social science research, coming back to mitigation, the kind of area work that would need to be done, some of the areas that where work needs to be done is what would be required to better understand climate mitigation, what are perceived and actual risks of renewable energy technologies, again, same for CDR, and can an approach be taken that address both mitigation and adaptation at the same time? And in terms of education and awareness, as you know, what should be the focus of the effort? You know, what can be considered a go-to federal website, or is it better to just, you know, retain resources in different labs as they are currently being done? And the third is that with regard to CDR in itself, there's been work going on in blue carbon for a while. And how can that be best communicated? Can that be a template and other work on CDR? These are just some resources around CPO. I confess I may have run over my time. So Katie, I'm going to just turn it over to you, and we can even hold questions for later so that Brenda has adequate time to go over her presentation.
Thank you so much, Neeharika. If I don't see any questions yet, so we will just move on. So I will invite our second speaker, Brenda Rashleigh, to come on camera and share her screen. Well, everyone, I want to thank Neeharika for giving that wonderful first talk. We're going to move gears, switch gears to Brenda Rashleigh, who also completed the Presidential Management, I'm going to get this right this time, Presidential Management Council Interagency Rotation Program as a Senior Policy Analyst for Water and Coasts. And I will let Brenda take it from here.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thanks for the help with this webinar program. So I'm Brenda Rashleigh, and through the President's Management Council Interagency Rotation Program, I've had the honor of working with NOAA's Climate Program Office for 6 months. Climate Program Office is working to provide the science and services for helping society address climate challenges. My project is looking at water quality in a changing climate, and I'm using the Clean Water Act definition of water quality, so physical, chemical, and biological characteristics of water bodies, and particularly in relation to designated uses. In alignment with NOAA's strategic plan to build a climate-ready nation, the Climate Program Office is prioritizing 5 climate-related challenges facing society, as Neeharika described. Of those 5, the 3 shown here are more directly related to water quality. For my project, I conducted what I call a landscape analysis, reviewed several factors listed here to try to identify opportunities for the Climate Program Office and other climate partners to make progress and advance this area of water quality in a changing climate. So I'm going to present results for each of these 3 climate challenges, starting with droughts, floods, water availability, and quantity. And so for this challenge, we recognize that as climate changes, floods and droughts are more likely, and these effects may compound as they repeat. So droughts, floods, and flow alteration can impact water quality, aquatic ecosystems, and the services they provide. Some examples for drought include impacts on drinking water, including impacts on source water and private wells, effects of reduced dilution and increased temperature and how that affects pollution discharges, and also higher temperatures leading to reduced oxygen for invertebrates and fish. Floods can lead to increased nutrient loading, affecting algal blooms, and also increased contaminants, leading to toxicity. So the vision that CPO has, Climate Program Office has, is that people have the knowledge and capacity to plan for and respond to changes in quantity and quality to minimize impacts and risks. So looking at this landscape, NOAA has quite a leadership role in this area. One area is that the NOAA-led NIDIS program, the drought information system, provides national scale drought information to help the country plan and prepare for drought. While this is mostly focused on quantity, there are some aspects of water quality. For instance, there's some funding was provided to look at ecological drought, and two of those projects in particular consider water quality, one looking at salt marsh salinity and how that affects plants, another looking at how trout fisheries are affected by a changing temperature. There was a recent workshop on drought assessment in a changing climate, and once that report is available, it should provide some additional insight. I want to also mention the Climate Adaptive Drought Planning Platform that is being developed as a whole of government collaboration, integrating and curating scientific data, products, and downscaled climate modeling for drought risk assessments in a changing climate. It's a deliverable to the National Drought Resilience Partnership. It's expected by the end of 2026. And my understanding is that water quality will be considered as a part of this. For floods, I want to note that NOAA provides river flood forecasts using the National Water Model on timescales of hours up to 30 days for over 2.6 million stream segments. This is the flow and velocity forecasts, so not water quality yet, but there are some plans to include temperature, is my understanding, as of 2025 or 2026, and then salinity following that, and also to extend it to some unrepresented areas. So there's quite a lot of work in this area. Also note that the NOAA's Weather, Water, and Climate Strategy for fiscal year 23 to 27 envisions enhanced water resources analysis and prediction, and it includes water quality, and it calls particularly for new methods for accurately capturing the full economic costs of drought. So based on that background, some opportunities that I think are available in this space are, first of all, to develop and deliver information on water quality effects of drought. So the partners that I mentioned before could continue advancing this understanding of the effects of drought and low flow on water quality and on ecosystems, particularly through something like a systematic literature review or evidence mapping, and explore the delivery of this information, data, and indicators through some of the venues that already exist for delivering the water quantity information, such as the drought.gov, the Climate Adaptive Drought Platform that I mentioned, and also possibly regional networks. I think there's also the opportunity, as that knowledge is developed, to bring in the role of Indigenous knowledge. I think consider that, and also these activities would provide a more complete approach to drought, considering quality as well as quantity, and also support economic and cultural analyses. Another opportunity is related to supporting water modeling for climate scenarios and timescales. This would include innovative thinking about how events can be considered in the context of a changing background. It also considers our modeling on timescales, maybe from seasons to decades, improving our use of scenarios, and also really creating climate-ready models. For instance, assessing our defaults and our assumptions to see if they're appropriate for climate applications. And this benefit would be, this would support planning and preparedness. The second challenge I want to move to is coastal changes and inundation. Recognizing that as climate changes, coasts are experiencing rising sea level, heavier precipitation, stronger storm surges, and more impervious surface area. So in addition to the damage from flood waters, there are also water quality impacts. There's a risk that things like drinking water, hazardous waste, and wastewater infrastructure will fail in an extreme event, putting people at risk for exposures to pathogens, contaminants, and other harmful chemicals. In addition to extreme events, there's also a need to consider chronic effects at the coast, including saltwater intrusion, harmful algal blooms, and hypoxia. So the vision that CPO has for this challenge is that communities and businesses have the knowledge and capacity to prepare for these changes along the coast by implementing effective resilience strategies. So the coastal space is a complex one. There's so much going on, and virtually everything that's coastal really is climate. And so there are many NOAA coastal tools and programs. For example, in NOAA, the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program expands regional capacity. The Climate Zone Management Program works with states and territories to consider climate. The NEARS Estuarine Research Reserves support integrated water monitoring and analysis. Sea Grant supports local capacity. There are several funding programs through the Climate Program Office, through the National Ocean Service, programs related to harmful algal blooms and effects of sea level rise. The more recent bill and IRA funding, particularly related, one example is Climate Ready Workforce, investing in workforce training focused on climate resilience. Nature-based and engineering solutions are proposed for coastal adaptation. And so accelerating nature-based solutions is the goal in the 2023 Ocean Climate Action Plan. And the key approach is blue carbon. So this is marshes, seagrass, mangroves that provide climate solutions, but also provide co-benefits related to water quality. In addition to nature-based solutions, engineering solutions such as surge barriers have been proposed, and these could also have water quality effects. The report pictured here on coastal inundation on climate timescales from 2022 supports solutions with an operational framework for climate services delivery, and note that this is sort of in the context of the federal framework and action plan for climate services. And I want to note in this document too, there's a table that lists over 100 coastal inundation decision makers. So really this is quite a complex space. So in that context, I've listed a couple of opportunities here to suggest, and the first is organizing water quality information from these existing tools and activities, and perhaps delivering those through a climate-ready workforce water quality training. So just note that there are tools, indicators, case studies, success stories, systematic maps that are all relevant to water quality in different venues, including the Climate Resilience Toolkit. And often they're spread out, sometimes underwater and sometimes under ecosystems. So I think just pulling those together would be a benefit, particularly enhancing capacity and usability of coastal tools. A second opportunity would be the development of a framework that integrates human and natural systems for coastal water quality. And this is something we hear often in the coastal space, the integration of human and natural systems, the built and natural environment. And considering this, this could be in the form of a conceptual modeling to support the work. Particularly trying to identify some aspects of trade-offs, synergies, indirect effects, and even unintended consequences. This could be coupled with the actions to implement the coastal inundation information framework that I showed on the previous slide. The third challenge that I want to mention is related to changes in freshwater and marine ecosystems. Recognizing that the pace and scale and pervasive nature of climate-related changes in marine and freshwater ecosystems poses serious threats to the ecosystems and communities that depend on them. So freshwater and marine water quality may decline under future climate due to increased temperatures, increased inputs, and changes in circulation. And so these changes in water quality, such as temperature, sediment, water clarity, nutrients, oxygen, acidification, bacteria, algae, and contaminants could all affect aquatic systems. So the vision is for CPOs that the best available science and services inform actions to protect marine and freshwater ecosystems and the communities that rely on them. So considering this, the sort of the background or landscape, NOAA has a tremendous amount of work in this area, supporting and conducting coastal and marine ecosystems research, for example, in the Great Lakes, and on multiple coasts, models and assessments for physical, chemical, and ecological drivers and feedbacks, and also in National Marine Fisheries Service, particularly ecosystem-based management. There's also significant funding for this work in this area, and I want to call out the Climate, Ecosystem, and Fisheries Initiative in NOAA, which will be building a nationwide ocean modeling and decision support system, and this is the Climate Program Office is supporting this too. It provides a nice framework using what's pictured here, the MOM6 model from NOAA Research, downscaled from global down to the regional scale, and being coupled with biogeochemistry models to support fisheries. Also, I want to note that the Ocean Climate Action Plan supports solutions in this space. So some opportunities, first of all, evaluating for the freshwater side, climate and water quality impacts for sensitive freshwater habitats and species. So NOAA has a more limited legislative mandate, I would say, related to the freshwater side. Some aspects to consider would be maybe flooding and droughts in lakes and wetlands. The Arctic, perhaps developing a water quality indicator for the Arctic report card, and also considering migratory fish affected by climate in both their freshwater and marine habitats and how that could be coordinated. And work in this area could broaden the scope of CPO's portfolio on the freshwater side. And then more on the marine side, I suggest the opportunity for CPO and partners to advance a data-informed end-to-end modeling capability for nearshore water quality. So considering the connections between physical to chemical, biological to socioeconomic endpoints, which would have multiple benefits. So informing management for sanctuaries, for fisheries, recreation, also aquaculture and mitigation. And so tying back to what Neeharika talked about for marine carbon dioxide removal, this table 3 in the report that Neeharika mentioned shows the different types of marine CDR in the rows, and across the columns, different ecological or human impacts, including water quality impacts. And there's a recognition that those impacts occur, and there's this kind of modeling that I'm suggesting could help us consider the direction and the nature of those impacts. So then just summarizing these opportunities to advance water quality in a changing climate, I presented these opportunities related to the 3 main challenges identified by the Climate Program Office. You could think of sort of the top row as being more related to climate services or providing or improving actionable information. And the bottom line really improving the scientific foundation for these climate actions. Taken together, these really help support climate adaptation, resilience, and mitigation, which is needed for building a climate-ready nation. So I will stop there, and I'll invite Katie back on to help us with questions.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I will remind everybody that the question panel is where you can put questions. I will also invite Neeharika back on to the screen to see if we do have any questions. Thank you both for this. This was enlightening. I did not know of the President's Management Interagency Rotation Program until now, and then seeing the amazing work you were doing with NOAA during this time was great to see. If we don't have questions, which I'm not seeing any yet, I believe both of you put some information at the end of your slides saying to reach out to a particular person within the Climate Program Office, correct?
That is correct, yes. So I would suggest getting in touch with Anarita Mariotti, whom we work closely with.
Great, thank you. And how, I'm just gonna ask in general about this program. How did you guys hear about this program to do the interagency rotation? And were you able to pick NOAA? And if so, why NOAA?
You wanna go first, Neeharika?
Yeah, so how did, Katie, your question was about how did we get to know about this program? And we got to know about this program because there was, an agency-wide kind of notification that went out on it. This is a program that's run twice a year. So we were the spring cohorts, and I believe there's a group of fall cohorts too. And it's open to, as I described, mid-level, any like agency professionals upwards, to provide them professional development opportunities. And all participating agencies can proffer opportunities, or they can also solicit interest, or you could have staff who end up applying through this. And so there's an application process that Brenda and I both went through, and NOAA had, this was one of the opportunities NOAA had put forth, and it looked really interesting and fascinating, and which is why I applied for it. So, and I'm gonna turn it over to Brenda now so she can share her perspective.
Thanks, Neeharika. That's a good description of the program. I just say it's a huge benefit to rotate to a different agency and be exposed to how they operate, and really it helps us make connections back to our home agency. Thanks.
Thanks, Brenda and Neeharika. We do have another question, and I believe this could be answered by either one of you, but if our questioner wants to clarify, I'm happy to do that. But given the scale and scope of the concepts you outlined, NOAA will need partners. And a key partner seems to be the Army Corps of Engineers. Are they on board or being coordinated with for your efforts?
Yeah, in my efforts, I had not identified the Army Corps of Engineers, and it may have less to do with the fact that they are not already working. One of the core groups working, especially around the outreach extension, is the Sea Grant colleges, as well as the Bureau of BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, the EM part, I'm going to get this wrong, but that they work in the coastal and in the ocean areas. And I will not be surprised, and as well as DOE, and I will not be surprised if they are already working with Corps of Engineers. So at least in terms of climate mitigation, I totally hear where Corps of Engineers could potentially play a role, but at least in my direct engagement, I had not identified them.
I'll say, yeah, I definitely recognize Corps of Engineers as a partner, particularly related to droughts, floods, water availability, harmful algal blooms. I mentioned the Corps of Engineers led a really nice interagency workshop a few months ago related to harmful algal blooms in the freshwater side, and then certainly at the coastal margin as well, and the construction there. And I would say interagency coordination in general is very strong in multiple places. Through the USGCRP is a primary place for that. Thanks.
Thank you both. And then I did have a question of, would you be willing to share the slides from your presentation with today's attendees if requested?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So if anyone does want these slides, you can always email the library at library.seminars@noaa.gov, and we will get you in touch with both Brenda or Neeharika for those slides. But we are close up to time, and I am not seeing any other questions right now. So as a reminder, if you do have questions, Brenda and Neeharika will be here for maybe, 3 more days?
That's right. That's right.
3 more days, and their rotation will be over. So please reach out to the Climate Program Office to follow up on the work they were doing. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again, Brenda and Neeharika, for this wonderful presentation.